want some context around a panel on Gen X wisdom, I'll share the usual synopsis of Gen X. This generational cohort is generally defined as being born between 1965 and 1980. Children of the 70s and 80s, they came of age in the 80s and 90s. They created a youth culture of subgenres, especially in music, and they became adults just as the dial-up World Wide Web was about to upend or revolutionize commerce, communication, and media. Known as the MTV generation, or referred to as latchkey kids, Gen X grew up during a time of significant social and technological change. They're often characterized as self-reliant, pragmatic, and skeptical. And after years of being largely ignored by marketers and mainstream culture, who are very busy focusing on millennials, but we're kind of okay with that. As the New York Times put it in their 2023 article about Gen X moving into leadership positions across the economy, Gen X is in charge, don't make a big deal about it. This generational leadership shift, combined with the rise of AI, and what we see as a collective exhaustion from social media and the interruptions of the attention economy, it does not surprise me that the 90s are having a moment. Gen X has been there and done that. The cynical slackers, the analog to digital adapters of the 90s have lived through and professionally navigated a lot of turbulence. And while our VHS and cassette tapes, our CDs, our floppy disks, our hard disks, our Walkmans, our Discmans, and all of our old cell phones, maybe in the junkyard, or in the case of my husband, bins in the basement, the wisdom gained that comes from a place of resilience and experience can never go obsolete. So join me in welcoming our panelists today. As we know, when it comes to experience, our title or current title usually doesn't sum that up. And so I am actually going to introduce each of us through what is our most enduring Gen X trait, and then turn it over to our panelists to talk a little bit about what their title is and how, what their experience is. And then we're going to get into some deeper questions, and then we'll move to some lightning rounds. So I will begin. My enduring Gen X trait is my inability to give up shopping at the mall. I cannot do online shopping. All right, and now I'm going to introduce Dave Habeeb. Dave's most enduring Gen X trait is that he will go to the cinema to see a film he already owns on DVD and has seen hundreds of times via streaming, because he believes the best way to see a film is with an audience in a darkened theater. Yeah. Plus, he loves fresh popcorn and used to be a film projectionist back in the day. So, Dave, I'm going to have you share, what's your title? What do you want to share with us?
So I'm Dave Habeeb. I'm creative director on the multimedia production team at Harvard Business School. Separately, I directed a film, a documentary about women in the Boston music scene. So the parallel outside of my work.
And that's called Beautiful Was the Fight, and it's wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. Oh, you can, if you would, yes. All right, so obviously Nina Webb is next. Nina's most enduring Gen X trait is the guilty pleasure of scrolling YouTube like it's still basic cable, secretly anticipating the unexpected discovery of a show or a movie she's seen countless times and appreciating the rare moment of being directed instead of always choosing. Yes, welcome, Nina. Oh, I think we need to turn it on.
So excited to be here. I have basically been transitioning from 25 years in music industry. Hello. Oh, wow, this is nice. So I'm transitioning for the last 3 years out of a very long career surviving major record labels in New York City, but I started all in Boston, and so did a lot of different jobs through marketing. Ended up being head of marketing for Atlantic Records in New York. And now I am so excited to be teaching again, trying to pass on this crazy real world knowledge, as well as I still consult for brands and artist strategy and fan activations.
Great, welcome, Nina. All right, Dr. Brent Smith. Brent's most enduring Gen X trait is unrelenting adaptiveness.
All right, hello everyone. Hello. Oh, that was pretty good on the first try. Nice. So unrelenting adaptiveness, I guess in very short terms, I would say since childhood, I've learned to always be reinventing myself, never staying like a solid, probably more like water, right? More like liquid and sometimes like gas. I was fortunate to be raised by a lot of different people from around the world, and one thing I really appreciated was that all rising gases meet. So trying to be, striving to be like gas, to meet those who venture beyond. So that.
Excellent, Brent, thank you. All right, and welcome Michael Gilday. Michael's most enduring Gen X trait is assuming the system is broken and building around it. Underpinned by a firm belief that Wu-Tang is for the children. He still dreams on the daily about getting a call to be a correspondent on MTV News.
So sad. Does anybody even know what MTV News is? Well, we should, because Doug Herzog is the man who helped start it, and he's going to be taking over as chairman of Board of Trustees, which is very exciting. Michael Gilday, I'm CEO and executive creative director of a creative agency. We're called Deep Vibe. We're entering our 4th year in July. I have run sort of from every end of media and entertainment and creative and marketing. I worked in radio. I started my career as an interactive producer on the Truth Anti-Smoking campaign. I worked in film and TV. I worked on the TV show Lost for the first 2 seasons in Hawaii, and then terrible film and TV in LA, came back to marketing. I've worked at agencies, I've worked in-house. I've spent a lot of time trying to not sell out my creative self while also selling things to people that they don't need. I'm not sure I succeeded, but it's been an interesting road, and we all started at the transition. Many of us started our careers at the transition from a fully analog world to a fully digital world. No one else in the history of all of humanity can say that they bridged that gap. It's a very interesting one, and there's a lot of instructiveness for where we're headed now, and also some pitfalls that we should keep in mind as well.
Thank you. All right, so I thought we would start with actually our main topic today. So there's Gen X wisdom, and then there's also how to not sell out your creative self. And I've asked each of our panelists to share a moment, a philosophy, something that just resonates with them about their own story or experience. So in a kind of longer format question. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave.
What came to mind for me was being Gen X. Whether I liked it or not, I lived in the fully analog world for a long time, but also lived through sort of a transition into some form of digital. And now, today with AI kind of knocking on the door, I try to look at everything as a blessing or a curse. And I would say it's been a blessing. If I'm going to succeed in the digital world, for me, it has to be grounded in the analog world, or I hate to say this, the human experience more so than digital and technology. And yet, I so appreciate, first of all, I marvel at the advances in technology, the very smart people who create faster cameras and the internet and social media, et cetera. But I want to use them to not lose what I'm trying to be as a creative or even just a person. So I see them as tools, but I feel like I have a certain appreciation for them because, again, I didn't have a choice in this. Born out of the analog world. So for me, it just it gives me perspective, which I could say better for worse. For me, I'd say better, but I know that everyone's experiences are different. So.
Thank you. Nina, do you want to take it next?
I'm gonna give it to Michael or Brent because I've got a few things floating.
Okay.
Give me the question again.
We'll pass it to Brent. So what is a kind of as you think about Gen X wisdom and you think about how to not sell out your creative self, what is a philosophy or a defining moment that stands out to you when you are reflecting on your own experience?
Okay, I'll try to answer it this way. So when I was a kid, there was a major in the military. One of my mentors gave me some great advice in the early 80s. Brent, know what lines you won't cross before you get close to them. And coming up as a creative, kind of in my, beginning to blossom in my 20s and whatnot, and I wanted to sign to Motown and do some other stuff. And, there were times when I was invited to sell out to get the kind of deal I wanted. And I didn't get the deal that I wanted time after time. So in a way, it's kind of what led me into getting into web development. So in the mid to late 1990s, I remember kind of starting developing websites. I had a mentor at Tulane in New Orleans. And then I started developing these websites, and I was doing deals with America Online at the time. Remember them? Right? I learned how to bring my creative interest to creatives, because I also grew up in a business family. And I said, well, I want to do things that help people connect and get exposure in ways that they can just keep their integrity. And understanding the business side, I wouldn't require them to sell out, and the connections I would help them make that they might not be able to make on their own. That went on to kind of play itself out in a deal with like Real Player. Do you remember them? Any folks, right? Yeah. This was early streaming, like really early streaming. Yeah. And then there was one other example that for me is very Gen X, about kind of connecting, but not just connecting like we see today, but connecting with real relationship, right? Something I think gets a little bit lost in the sauce today, right? We've got lots of connections, not a lot of significantly meaningful relationships, right? For who we are as human beings. And kind of being a church kid, I recognized, for the diaspora that I belong to, a lot of us, when we would be moving to different parts of the country, we'd be looking for a place to worship, and we could never really find it. We had the Yellow Pages. It was the best we had. Remember those? The Yellow Pages, right? Okay. And so I'd been doing some coding for hours and hours and hours, and I came up with this thing I called the Black Church Locator. And it was a deal I did with MapQuest that was later acquired by AOL, where you could enter something you do very simply now. You could enter your 5-digit zip code, and I would produce a search page of results with maps and directions. Now, it sounds really basic right now, but back then that was huge. And so part of it was kind of helping people understand that technology doesn't have to be such a far afield kind of thing, right? It's not even a threat. It is what we make it or what we allow it to be in our lives, right? And then I'm going to shut up in a second. Some kind of way, I came up looking at technology like I did understanding hip hop. That there was a lot of stuff around me, and it could be anything that I wanted it to be. And as I had more conversation with people, this is relationship, not connection, then we would discover places we could take it and it could take us. And so we end up developing networks, right? You get this term 80s, 90s networking, right? So what we started realizing was that a lot of the technology that we thought we lacked was actually us. Just a thought.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about, what was it about the 90s? Like, we had a monoculture from the advent of radio and television for a long time, pop culture. And then we had countercultures, which were, in response to sort of the, the universal American culture. And obviously it's very America-centric. But the concept of selling out, is very Gen X and existed a little bit before, and then eventually completely faded away when everything became, the goal was to just become influential or get rich quick or whatever, you know, a lot of social media has turned into in many regards. But back then, it took a long time to make things. It took a long time to create things. And I think people fetishize now maybe the, you know, the analog portion of it, you know, but that's really the artifact or the output. It's not actually, what was important was the process and how we had to, you know, take what were limited tools and, you know, figure out how to make something great without not only no promise of a payoff, but almost no expectation that it was going to pay off, especially in the counterculture, you know, like, and some of the most amazing things were made in, you know, starting in the late 70s, you know, in the US with hip hop especially, you know, and then into the 80s with, you know, what ended up being college radio and underground rock and punk rock in the 70s and 80s. You know, a lot of those people did not have an expectation that once they figured it out, they were going to make a lot of money, but they did it because of love. And the enduring things that came out of that were very powerful. And in the 90s, the 90s started off as, you know, the greatest explosion of entertainment and culture and art and independent cinema and everything, and ended up really, really, really poorly. I don't know if anybody's seen any of the two documentaries on Woodstock 99. Did not end well. And it's because a lot of large business interests came in and bought up everything, and it watered everything down, and we all got confused, and then the internet came along and things got real weird. But, you know, there's still a lot to that, working hard, valuing the small wins, especially in any creative endeavor and battle, and putting one foot in front of the other without an expectation of an end goal, obviously having a vision and a direction. But that can lead to incredible, amazing, and enduring things. And in this moment where, you know, we are now discovering that you can potentially automate everything and smooth away all the friction, you get left in a world filled with, you know, with AI slop. You know, so the goal should be to accelerate the things that you can, the things that aren't important to you and your soul and your process, but ascend your friction to the things that where you can bring your own unique perspective and value. And I think that's where we can still, you know, create those things that were amazing and interesting back then in a fully new context. So I don't know, a bit of rambling answer.
I call part of that question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Oh, you're ready? Yeah. So I was just going to say, I call part of what Michael said, this like question. I was like, how did we go from Pearl Jam to Paris Hilton? I was like, what happened? All right, Nina, let's turn it over to you.
There's just so many different layers here, but when I think of like with the 90s, I went to Emerson College, and I was living in Cambridge and living on Beacon Street at one point, and working at WERS, and and there was just like we just went out all the time to shows that we didn't even know who was playing. Like there, you know, you just would go to the Middle East like all the time. The Paradise all the time. TT's in the Paradise all the time. Like I just went everywhere. I didn't know who was playing. I wasn't researching them. I wasn't like making sure all my friends went. There's no followers. Like, we didn't even care. We felt like that sense of discovery, of finding somebody, of connecting with others, and just making it like the journey as opposed to the destination, and whether it was going to be the perfect fit for type of music. There was such a beauty in that, maybe back to my cable obsession of I just want to be surprised by like Overboard playing again. Like, you know, anybody knows that movie? It's definitely on the assignments for the students. But there was just that beauty of connecting and not knowing and not having to know all the time. I started working at Sony Music out of the Lexington branch when I was told I needed an internship. But there was also a beauty of not having so much data at your fingertips. There's a real double-edged sword. We talk about this in class. Sometimes it's just you're working on it and you're promoting it and you're marketing it because you just really, really, really believe it. and you really love it, and it takes time. So now they, within a week, will say, this isn't working. They didn't get enough followers. They didn't have enough views. Something's wrong. And there's just this narcissistic view of everybody stopping and, retaining information, digesting it, and making a decision, that's just not how things are working right now. So I think there was just like, felt like you're a part of a community and culture, and I would be at record store day, record stores, and putting up posters and connecting with managers. And so before I came and did a workshop here spring of 2024, the night before, I was like, what am I missing? And I look and I realize that basically my career was the crater of the music industry. So 1999 was the biggest revenue in the history at that time with CD sales and downloads starting. And then, downloads was after. And then there was a crater called the internet and illegal file sharing. I was here when Napster started. And then 2023, at the end of when I was there at Atlantic, was the next highest revenue once they figured out streaming. But all of it was disruption, and it was stressful and chaotic. But how the music industry reacted so poorly with the level of denial, and I use this example of working this band Jamiroquai, Traveling Without Moving, and part of the campaign was a $30 modem that my boss said I could not get approved. And then as I was a feisty young one, just asked him why not. And he's like, Nina, you keep promoting this internet thing, and we're not gonna have jobs in the future. So the level of denial was so intense, and I think, we could have learned a lot from that.
Thank you. So this event is called The Intersection, but also Gen X works quite perfectly in this because I see this intersection, especially for this event today, as this intersection between experience, leadership, pop culture, and technology. So I'd love for each of you to pick one or two. Is it leadership and pop culture? Is it technology and experience? And think of something that is a piece of wisdom to share with our audience or that speaks to your own experience around that. To give you some time, I will share that occasionally I look around my house and I'm like, why do we have so many toys? And most of them are my husband's. And I think about all of these things we grew up with where the toy manufacturers were like Saturday morning cartoons, and like my brother had all the He-Man figures. And that was fabulous. We had a lot of good times. But like we had all the toys, and now they're collectible, and now there's like a big trade market. But I just feel like there are these certain things that speak to that moment in time that we've carried forward, but that millennials have escaped. Go on.
I'm going to try to chime in on this one. So this is a few things. Maybe it's leadership and culture and experience. I'm reminded of not just hip hop, but the days when my friends and I would pile into my car to go to the club, to find a spot with our cardboard so we could break dance and pop lock.
Go play Street Fighter. I did a lot of that.
When I think about how I lead today, it was powered by what I learned back in the 80s, early 90s. And some of you know I come from this. I am because we are. So it means that we prioritize being together as our agenda, not what we're going to do. So we should come together as a result. Small but significant difference. So we're not doing anything unless we're doing it together. If I'm winning and you're not, we're not winning. If I go first, it means I'm going first, but I'm coming back to bring others. And if others go before me, we're still going to be together. So it says there's maybe a longitudinal arc to our story. It's not a story in isolation, but it's, we know we have us, right? You hear it sometimes, right? We're all we got, we're all we need. So this notion of we is always pervasive out of my Gen X experience. So it still kind of carries forward today. So when people see, I think you mentioned earlier, if Gen X is now a little more in charge than others, right? I think it's a great opportunity where you have artificial intelligence and people questioning where's the place for humanity. Maybe there's some benefit to having people who center humanity, even while this other stuff is rushing at us. And I guess the last comment I would make is, the rapper Habeeb had this song, had 2 words, do you. And today in the 2020s, you might hear the concept of maintain frame, right? Wherever you go, you've got to know who you are. So your strategy, your agenda is always about how well you maintain your frame, regardless of how VUCA the world is, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. As long as you are doing you, you don't really ever sell out. As long as you are consistent and persistent, people join you, they recognize your gravity. And this notion of keeping it real, very Gen X. If I can't keep it real, I'm not doing it. And if you're not keeping it real, we're not going to do anything together. We're just not. There's just no room for that. So there's a certain amount of integrity that meets, maybe it provides a nexus for that leadership and culture and experience. It's what we do. It's how we are.
Thank you, Brent.
I mean, I can build off that a little bit. It's interesting that you said, doing things together, Brent, because now that I think about it, obviously, like Nina mentioned, I went to thousands of shows, and I felt like I felt the most alive when I was at concerts, live music, and it's such a communal experience. But even listening to full albums in the car with your friends, going places, and discovering it together. Or
did you say like a full album? Like you listen like the whole thing?
The whole experience, as intended by the artist.
Not shuffled.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't want to get me started in the music industry and how they ignored the desire passed to the public, and if they had just given a little bit, maybe grandma wouldn't have learned how to pirate music. But there's something to independent cinema, coming back and really reaching its peak in the early and mid '90s, and cinema is a very communal thing. Stand-up comedy kind of reaching one of its early peaks too in the '90s. Like there is a lot to pressure testing ideas, creative, I name my agency Deep Vibe because I firmly believe there are things that shake people's souls that are undeniable. I think that great creative is not made, it's discovered. But to discover it, you have to discover it for yourself, but also you have to discover things that really resonate across other human beings, and it's one of the challenges in the future until the robots end up being the audience, which may happen at some point. There will still be a need to create things that connect deeply to other humans. And what we have in common is way, more vast than the differences that we have. But our individual differences and unique points of view are, how we take, the individual and make it the universal, and vice versa. So I think it's been really interesting moving from a monoculture and countercultures to now 10 billion micro subcultures, and everybody's able to niche down on everything, which in one way is great, that people can be who they are. But sometimes ideas, emotions, perspectives need to be pressure tested by a community, David Mamet once said that, audience members, individuals, are dumb. Audiences are very smart, because collectively in the room, they sniff out bullshit like immediately. And we need that, and in a world where everything scams and everybody's got inflated numbers or, like I lived in Los Angeles for a few years working terrible film and TV, and I was in a band out there, and it was so hard before I moved there, I'm gonna try to make this short, I'm sorry. Before I moved there, I thought that hype was something that got airdropped, or marketing from the skies. And then I moved to Los Angeles and I realized that it's actually just something that is physically pushed out of that place. So it's way more concentrated there. And that is a weird and strange feeling, you know, like it's changed a little bit with the internet, but they used to just physically push it out to the rest of the country and thus the world. So in that place, it was impossible for any artist, musician, anybody to get critical mass. It's not like a New York or San Francisco where some band gets hot, people were showing up and they're like, in that place, like everyone was questioning, like, is it real? Or was there a lot of money put behind it? Who knows? And that is only magnified in the internet age. But it is important to figure out how to get together to create things collaboratively that are real and human. And then, I don't know, somehow we need to rework the system so that real people can champion those things. And it means identifying struggle, you know, and identifying earned, you know, experience that is expressed through art and really putting our dollars and our voices behind it.
If you would like to, or go to the next question. All right, so, let's put the mic back. No problem. So, throughout your careers, what have been opportunities and also what have been setbacks as industries have reset? What have been opportunities and what have been setbacks as industries have reset?
I can start. Hello. Yeah, let's see, how can I say this? The advances in technologies this one's tuned to my voice, right? The advances in technologies, again, are kind of a marvel in them of themselves, I think. And I would be not giving credit where credit's due if I couldn't acknowledge that all these shifts, including the internet, including social media, enabled people like me or everyone, any of us, to do some of the things we wanted to do where honestly, otherwise it might have literally been impossible. I could not make the music documentary I made, you know, on my own, self-funded, on my own time, without modern technology, desktop editing, and other, you know, cameras, relatively inexpensive cameras. But anything that changed in the industry, and I have to say, maybe until AI, enabled us to do something maybe a little better. I don't even know how to define better. I don't understand this obsession with perfection in almost anything. I don't understand that. I don't know why we care so much about it. So again, what we said earlier, smoothing out everything, removing all friction from the experience. I don't even understand how to compute that. So, but they always, for me, were tools that did not rob me and the people I work with of ourselves. I mean, I really believe that if I use Photoshop, to me, that's not cheating because it doesn't do anything until I don't say master it, but I use it and I pour over it and I make it work. This microphone does not work if it's just sitting there on the table by itself. But if these tools and the technology really are, I don't mean, when I say replacing us, I don't mean replacing us, removing job opportunities. That's critical. I'm not even talking that. When I get up in the morning, I have a job. I could go use some technologies and let it do everything for me. Then I look in the mirror and I don't know really what's going on anymore. So I always look at these things as what is the redeeming value of the tools and the, let's say, the landscape that we're working in, on the environment, and then what is the redeeming quality of the thing I'm even trying to do. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be film or music. It could be anything that's important to you. Cooking. I love to cook and host people at my house. If I could get a technology to make the meal for my guests, which I just did last night. I'm sorry, I didn't get the technology. I met friends over for dinner, and we had the best time, and it was a real experience. So I feel like I'm not focused, but I just want to pass that along, that that's what I'm constantly navigating, is welcoming in advances in technology and not being foolish enough to ignore them, but just, again, have some kind of grounding, a sense of being grounded in using them, so.
I think being in the music industry and starting my career in the music industry and seeing part of the creator, I think that what it did is we saw it with Napster kicking in out of Boston in June 1999, and then Spotify coming in another couple years later. What happened when I first started was the top was dictating what people were going to listen to, how it was going to sound, how it was going to be marketed, and they would dictate the priorities. So they would, obviously have radio play it so much that you start having the song in your head, but they were controlling the narrative of the artists. They were controlling how their brand was being, basically passed along because of press, right? There wasn't a direct dialogue with their fans. This was one way. Everything was one way. The album was made, labels decided what was coming out, what was going to be the visuals with the artist. Press was, obviously in charge of their editorial. So with the explosion of the internet and platforms, and it was dialogue from the artist to the fan for the first time ever. The artist had the opportunity to tell them what their point of view is, what they care about, what's important to them, and the fans can speak back to them. That never happened before. So there is a great opportunity for an even playing field of just allowing fans to have this one-on-one connection with an artist. And then also, to an extreme point, the labels were no longer in control. Like right now, they're no longer in control. None of the gatekeepers are making decisions without the fans speaking up first. And that's challenging news as well. There's amazing artists that can't get the social platforms moving as much as others do. But that type of evening the playing field, having fans and artists actually connect with each other is incredibly valuable and important. And then there's obviously, the technology on another side, which, you're going to always have the analog. You're going to always have people who really care deeply about that level of quality of music. When Spotify started talking to artists about compressing their music into an MP3, not having it in sequence, somebody can just listen to a song, that was horrifying for artists. And one of my favorite memories I flash back to is two of my friends in the Sony Music elevator in New York. And they're both hardcore music fans, both Anglophiles. And one was listening on his new iPod. He's got his iPod, he's in an elevator, he's doing a little dance and everything. And the other one was disgusted. He's like, I can't believe you bought that. I can't believe it. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I love vinyl. I have a record player. I love artists and albums. And my friend Dave was like, yeah, you can fit that in your bag? And I think it comes back to the positioning statement. Apple or iPod wasn't saying this is the best quality you can listen to your music. They're saying it's portable. They're just making it portable. So it's just understanding there's kind of room for lots of different pieces, but it doesn't mean that they're trying to be equal.
10,000 songs in your pocket. That was
That was pretty cool, by the way.
But then, I feel like when I'm in situations where I get to have a lot of bass, DJ Jasmine's out there, yes, she'll go with some bass today. It's so fabulous. It's oh yes, there's vibration with music, and it's that's how it's supposed to be heard. So yes, it's 10,000 songs in your pocket, and at the same time, it also is this weird sub-quality until you realize what it's like live.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm going to chime in a thought here. As much as I love technology and iPods and stuff, I think also, think about the prospects and the problems. And so the prospects, we got to store all this music. I also think about going back to what you mentioned about, Michael, about punk and rock and hip hop. I think about how many of us listen to our parents' music. And I think about how that gave us something to synthesize in our own way and then pass it forward. Because I'm left today sometimes wondering, what is listened to today that allows a synthesis that spans generations, such that it lives beyond all of us. So like to some extent, the arts, music in particular, reflects a cultural investment that we all make in our humanity. What we're going to pass on, what we're going to absorb, what we're going to assign to it as meaning. So whether it's a sample that comes about because we were listening to the same song at the same time, because there was one record player, and this is just what everyone's going to hear. And how that played such a role in some of the songs that later generations would hear from just a breakbeat or a 2-second loop. And it allows for a lot more conversation, connection, and relationship and possibility. And people start saying, wow, I've never heard that song before. Or they say things like this one, oh, I hate jazz. I'm like, no, that's impossible.
It is.
Show me your playlist, right? And then so it allows for the discovery that you mentioned. We start bumping into things that have been around a long time. So I say again, I am because we are. It's that spending time together when it's not quick, it's not easy, but it's consumed together. It's that pressure test, like, okay, yeah, I hear the song over and over again in the living room or in the kitchen, at the cookout, and I just kind of learn it, and I see how people look at each other, how they move together, how they smile, right? And in my field, marketing, we're burning impressions of moments. So now when I hear certain beats, when I hear Frankie Beverly and Maze, before I let go, I'm thinking about barbecue chicken. I'm thinking about hamburgers. I'm thinking about smiles. So again, centering being together, regardless of what we're doing together, it says we're going to show up for each other in a certain kind of way, which is something of a social innovation. When we look at today, when we talk about loneliness culture and social isolation, with all this technology we've got, more ways to connect than ever, but it tells us there's something that we haven't been consuming or co-creating together, because we're doing a lot in isolation. So it's got its rewards, it's got its prospects, but it also comes with its problems, right? And so going back to a Gen X kind of mindset, it's what is this doing for us? Not just you, not just me, but us.
Amen. I want to talk from just like a more pure creator perspective. I'm a writer, producer, director, musician, audio engineer, lots of other stuff. And when we made that transition from analog to digital, it was a really exciting time for those of us who were young and were willing to jump on the tools. I started using Pro Tools here at Emerson at the old ERS in '96, Pro Tools 3.0, and it blew my mind. And I never had a computer, even though I'd been introduced to one in second grade in the early '80s, and my teacher seemed to think I had an aptitude for it. Tried to convince my parents to get one my whole youth. It never happened. I bought my first computer when I was 25 after I graduated from Emerson, custom-built PC, and it was the greatest moment of my life. I finally had my own computer to make things. But I think a lot of us, there was a lot of people, there was a lot of typesetters, and print folks who did things in a very analog way, who were getting disrupted and were really concerned. But a lot of us were on, just learning the tools and open to it and ready to take over the world and make new things in new ways. And, there was a lot of talk of democratizing media at the time. And a lot of people now are looking back at that time going, oh, I survived that. I'll probably survive this. And many of us, especially our generation, I think a lot of our identities are wrapped around our skills, especially our hard skills. I learned how to, I'm an editor, I learned how to use these NLEs, or I don't know, I do 3D and I'm great at texturing and lighting, or, I do illustration and I do concept art. And as AI, is really disrupting the order and the process in which things could get made. Traditionally, they had to go through a pretty strict process to be able to afford it, to get critical mass of people to agree to invest time and money. Now you can kind of go from A to Q to banana to broccoli to B to C. And Gen AI tends to give with one hand and take with the other, and it's something you have to be careful of. But so many of us, like I said, our identities are wrapped up in what we did. And there's a lot of value that we have, especially as we get into the third acts of our career, that's underneath that surface of our identity as some kind of creator. And that is earned experience that we've gotten through our lives, trying to make things and failing and succeeding to make things that connect with other people, that move them, that become real in their minds. And it's an important moment for us, the older folks, to really interrogate who we are and what we bring to the work that we make, and not be identified by how we make it, but more by what we're trying to achieve. And it's particularly scary because, especially if you look in the last, few weeks, but especially the last year or two, there's a lot of, creatives at any enterprise, any, large business are the first ones to get cut when layoffs happen. They're like, get rid of the people who make the pretty pictures, which sucks, and there has been a sense of potential security, in in-house teams at, large enterprises, and then, the major labels and Hollywood, is frankly shitting the bed right now. There's a lot of really talented people who are being washed out because the work has just disappeared and moved. There's a ton of amazing people with lots of value who are just, it's an apocalypse right now, or the beginning of one. And there's an analog to the kids who are coming out of school right now, where AI has kind of leveled all of the entry-level jobs, all those apprenticeship-style jobs where you could learn the craft. Maybe it takes you 3 times as long, but you cost 1/3 as much, but you get a lot of value out of it. So I think there is a place where us older folks and the folks coming out, because we've reached our peak cost to business. Ideally, our peak value too, but our peak cost, and they're like, well, maybe if we've lopped off the bottom, maybe we just lop off the top. And I think it's going to be scary next year or two. But, long story long, I think that if we, us as the older folks, if we take time to actually interrogate what our real value is, we may discover that these new tools, if we lean into them, are kind of amazing. And if we make alliances with the Gen Zs and the future Gen Alphas, and I firmly believe the future is small. So if we make alliances of generations, I think we could flip this whole system on its head.
So I want to come to this question about the 90s having a moment. And I'd like to hear your take, maybe this is more of a lightning round. Why the nostalgia? Why now? And is there something maybe that you're nostalgic for, that you've kind of had enough of in terms of technology or attention economy in this moment? So what do you feel nostalgic for, and what do you think other people are feeling? Like, what are the trends?
I can't prove this, but I think collectively a lot of people are just feeling differently lately. Again, the pressure, the experiences with, again, excessive technology, not technology, but it's all around us. And again, different environments that we're all living in, most of us participate in. So I probably can't say exactly why or what people are feeling, but I think people might be feeling the intensity of all of it, whatever the all of it is for you, maybe more than ever. Previously shifts happened very incrementally. Now they're going like this, but they're also like 360, like they're very immersive. They touch like every part of our life. So I think because of it, and actually to its credit, people are exposed to things of the past more easily. We have access to information so much more quickly, that people can get samples of older music or something of the past. So I think they're also seeing glimpses of these things that they possibly didn't live through and would like to experience, or they lived through and they're longing for again. That at least would be for me. So.
Thank you.
I think that some of them are connecting with their parents, just like we did. Like, would want to wear their parents like sweatshirts or concert T-shirts. There are some iconic artists out at that time, and then a lot of current artists have been really playing up with Y2K2, with Charlie XCX and Sabrina Carpenter, and I think it just spirals. One thing I really crave, and I hope that it kind of comes back in like a real form, is just photo albums and photography in general. It just makes me sad to think that there's not some of that being passed down, like what happened with photography in general, overall. And it's great that everyone now feels really happy with their iPhone photos and everything's up on their platforms, but what are you actually walking away with? And one thing I love hearing about with the students and just seeing is, the excitement of doing things IRL and like going to, maybe a show or doing some pop-ups and experientials, and that has exploded on the music side and the branding side, or all of these fan experiential events. That's just really fun for people to be a part of their community because everyone is so isolated right now. And then one other thought I had, I took my 11-year-old to go see Wet Leg last year, and they're still figuring it out live. I'm supportive, but the opening band really needs to figure it out. But what was great is that I realized my son, who's super connected with music, everything is through like the speakers and from Spotify or Amazon. Everything is fully produced. And watching him watch these artists, because he's a perfectionist and he won't play drums anymore because he doesn't think it's good enough, or electric guitar is not good enough, or piano. And watching them, I'm like, they're just figuring it out. Like, it was so interesting to be like, it's not perfect. It's not what you hear through the speaker. That is not real. Watching these musicians try to figure out how to play live and connect with an audience is something that I think everyone really needs to keep seeing, because they're only seeing something that's manufactured in the end, which is a little scary to think about.
Any other thoughts?
I'll say what I'm nostalgic for, especially in terms of technology. In especially the late '90s, we had the most vivid imaginations, and our aspirations were like astronomical in our ambitions. And we didn't have the technology to do it, but we were like, wouldn't this be so cool? And the technology was so rudimentary. It's crazy. And now the technology can do so much, and we're so boring. We just want to do the same things in the same way, a little better or faster. And it's like, we can rewrite all of this. Like, what are communal experiences? I got so mad at Mark Zuckerberg and his Meta thing, where he went 10 years too early and spent billions of dollars. And you can actually have amazing metaversal style experiences now. My company has made multiple ones just for ourselves. Like, the technology is there, but the audience, doesn't know it exists and doesn't care, because we just keep doing the same things and allowing these major corporations with their algorithms to drive our whole entire experiences. I mean, algorithms are corrupt and evil and dangerous. And the more that we allow, when you move from a Facebook where you sort of have a relationship with your audience, maybe a YouTube, when you move to a TikTok where you don't even have a relationship with your audience, a corporation does, that is terrifying, because they can tweak their algorithm and then you don't have an audience anymore. And that is so sad. But all of we needed large corporations for a long time for distribution, for exhibition, for marketing, for production, and all of those barriers have fallen. We can make our own YouTube right now. Like, I'm not being hyperbolic. You can literally make your own YouTube right now. All the microservices that exist, yes, it would probably be backed by, a CDN that is YouTube or AWS or something, but you can make your own things right now, and our ambition is tiny. And it's like, if we just get together, the film business is dying. But you know what? And this is why I love what Ben Affleck and Matt Damon have done with Artist Equity, because they're reimagining how you compensate the people who make movies. And that's a big deal. We need more imagination now. We need to out-imagine these corporations and their AI, humanity-stealing technologies. And I say all this as someone who is a huge proponent of generative AI and has been using it daily for 4 years. But I think it's incumbent on and who spent years stomping my feet and clapping my hands going, can we slow down? Can we think about this? And we passed the last off-ramp a while ago. I firmly believe if I could unpress this button, I would, but I can't. If anybody can, please let me know. But the only way out is through. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity for those of us who model what amazing looks like, who have imagination, who do create and have ambition and get together and create things that could never be created before. We can model what the future looks like and potentially flip the system on all the people who invested trillions of dollars to create things that could automate us away and potentially automate them away with it.
And I would just add to that, clap, 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 is that there's no more powerful generation right now to do that than Gen Z, and then coming up with Gen Alpha. Like, that's the thing that blows my mind, is sitting in these classrooms, I'm like, you don't understand, they all want you. Like, you're the ones that are gonna dictate what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept. And everyone, and yes, there's a lot of jobs getting shuffled around, but all of these companies need to know what you like and take the temperature of, like, is this gonna work in your voice? Is the creative the right creative? How are we communicating it? That's, all of you are sitting, you know exactly, what is resonating and what is not. So be empowered by that, but your generation is the generation to decide, like, what will be next and what will be accepted.
But you don't have the anchors that we did of conventional wisdom. And you guys don't know what you can't do. And now you can do anything. So, like, don't listen to us and just go do.
Seriously.
Like, it's amazing what you can do.
Go ahead, Brett.
Just a thought, this is not a nostalgic thing, but I'm just vibing off of what they were saying. It occurred to me also, I was talking with my parents recently about some Gen X stuff, and I said, something I realized from speaking to them, they were laid off right before I went to college and my brother moved away to do his first job. And, was speaking, and I said, you know what? I think I realized something about us in Gen X is that we learned to trust systems only for as long as we believe they were working. But we have our own system. To your point about Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I think that's part of why there's a moment coming where people can see, you know what? It's not a matter of plugging into the thing and then you just go ride the conveyor belt and you just get the automatic output. It's you have to be in your own frame and you apply your system. That's the system that can't fail. Expect all the other ones around you to fail at some point, in some manner, in some way. So again, just a thought, but it's really, again, back to what Heather B said, do you, right? That there's a reliance that we don't have on these things around us. I think sometimes we have maybe, I'm gonna say as your successors, predecessors, I feel like sometimes we might not have done you full justice because we sometimes make it look like the systems actually work like A to B to C, and they really never did.
Yeah.
Right?
And now to bounce off of that, No, but it made me think about, one, I think growing up, I thought there was like one of 50 paths I just have to fit and figure out how do you mold yourself into one of the jobs that exist or industries that exist. And that's not the case anymore. It's always knowing who you are, what your talents and strengths are, what your value is, and like creating your own path. And I think it's just really exciting of, what you can do if you understand that we don't know the answers, like there's no particular path. And if we do a lot of following of like what takes off online, what content takes off, what song is taking off, what person, and it's consistently about the piece of content that is unexpected. It is unexpected, it's not predictable. That's the thing that usually has the biggest trigger. So I'd say try to be unexpected and don't be predictable. And have fun. Sometimes we forget that part.
I do want to open it up to questions from the audience. I felt like we transitioned right into my last question, which is wisdom to share. And I do feel like, speaking of systems that have failed, like we went from the 90s into the dot-com bubble burst. We went into the Great Recession, and then we always figured it out. And I think that that's a really powerful takeaway, is that one of the things that I think being hands-on, having community, not being obsessed with perfectionism from our childhood and our culture, like from coming of age, meant that we were scrappy in those times when we had to figure things out. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience, wisdom or a memory, or we can open it up to Q&A? Everybody's good? Talked you all out. All right, thank you to our panelists. We're going to go ahead and open it up to questions. So does anybody in the audience have any questions? Right, Emma.
This is specifically for Dave, but anyone can answer. But I really liked what you were saying about how nowadays there's this need or desire for perfection in the process and in the product and end result. And I was just curious kind of what you would what's your preference in kind of the process, and what do you look for when hiring someone or when collaborating with people?
I love that question. This speaks specifically to my team and my work at Harvard Business School. We produce video case studies with our faculty. And obviously, everyone on the team has a range of technical skills or skills in general. That's super important. But what we look for mainly is someone who can be present, someone who listens, someone who is accountable, meaning follow through, communication. These all sound like, oh yeah, obviously, right? Oh yeah. No, those, first of all, those are very elusive. They are like little eels that they slip right out of your hand. It is not as common as one would like. And for me, it's the most important thing. Again, someone who can read the room, someone who's intuitive, someone who's kind and you can work with them. And then I want to know what you know about editing and cameras, because the truth is, I have great respect for anyone who's technical and devoted years to any craft, and that takes a lot of work and accomplishment, but some of those things can be taught. We have someone who joined our team in the school who had zero production experience, but he was a good writer. He knows how to work with the faculty. He knows how to do case studies. And we said we could work with that. He understands the classroom environment, and we're teaching him editing or he's, technical skills second in that case. So there's just more important qualities, as I see now at this age, than what I used to think. We need to find the best cinematographer. We need to find the best audio person. Those things matter, but for me, they've dropped down on the list of important priorities. So.
Amazing, thank you.
All right, start coming around this way.
This has been an amazing panel. You guys are speaking to, I think, a lot of things that we're all wrestling with in our head. What is the master plan for AI music regulation? And I say this probably to Nina, because the anger I feel when Spotify is on shuffle and I'm listening to my soul music and a song comes on and it is AI. And they have literally someone has typed in, give me the best of Sam Cooke, Leon Bridges, and Bilal, and make 400 songs that you release per week.
I kind of want to hear that.
But
love Bilal.
then they have millions of streams, and a real soul music artist cannot compete. And there's no regulation, and obviously this gets political if we do a deep dive, but there's no label that says this is AI generated music. And it's killing me in my soul.
I hear you. I was like, why is this taking so long? Why isn't there a certain percentage of, like, after that AI is used that it has to be tagged? To me, it feels like, when you're getting money for an advertisement and then you're tagging that piece of social content is that. I know that they're in the middle of all of it. I think it's just it's taking way too long. I see Spotify is trying to have AI playlists. I think that they just, I don't know why it takes so long in the music industry. It's usually first hit. It's very complicated because everybody wants to define how much AI was used in the music. But I think they have to be transparent. And if there's a certain percentage that is being put AI, then that's what they need to tag. I know Spotify is doing now the DNA of music. So I'm curious to see if you see that, when you click on an artist, you'll see the writer, the producer, and all of that. I'd like to make sure that is located in there. So I know it's a hot subject right now, but the fact that they're taking so long is unfortunate because it's again, we've been through this for years. I think they think kind of ignorance first and a little greed, and then we got to clean it up. But it's all about the guardrails. And I know that I know a lot of lawyers, and I know that there's a shit show basically right now. Because it's not that clean about where they get it. And then Suno out of Boston. Yes. Yeah.
Suno's out of Boston?
Yeah.
Cambridge, yeah. I'd love to add to that.
Please do.
Regulation is not coming. Legislation is not coming. Litigation is not going to happen anywhere near fast enough. It's open. The answer to your question is build a Spotify. Blow up Spotify. Is that a simple thing? No, it's not. But we have to come up with new rules. The industry is not. Like I said, we passed these off ramps years ago, unfortunately, and people weren't paying attention, probably for very good reasons. Our lives are busy. There was a lot of corporate interest, but we've also been using machine learning and AI in all of our stuff for years. From Cambridge, Isotope is an amazing, they got bought by Native Instruments, but they were incredible, auto mixing and cleanup, using advanced machine learning. Same thing with Ableton. A lot of the tools have all used what is AI underneath, but now we can talk to AI, so we think it's different. And to some extent, it is different. Its capability has gotten a lot, more powerful. And unfortunately, I'm mad that they came for the poets and the painters of pretty pictures first. There's pretty good reasons for that because of how natural language processing works and how essential it is to LLMs and the whole system. Nonetheless, it sucks. I wish they were figuring out, how to solve cancer or do better plumbing or any other thing that, could be done at scale with robotics or whatever. But having said all that, we're going to have to figure out a way through and prioritize things. And shaking our fist at the tsunami and saying it's just not fair or I don't like it is not a survival technique.
But that's where it comes back to, I think, the fans and the consumers fighting back. It's the only way they're going to do it. It's just saying, I'm not having it, or having a new platform that absolutely has zero AI on it. There's a DSP, a digital service provider, that is all editorial curated versus algorithm curated music. It's all human beings, because right now there's only, like, I'd say 3% of Spotify playlists that are actually human created editorially. Like, it's very small percentage. Everything is algorithm. And then what's being fed for you is like, well, wait, I just listened to that once. So that's all, like, so there's a new DSP that's all curated by people and humans. Like, so I think, yeah, everyone's gonna have to speak up for them to go faster.
Well, but I also agree. I believe the opposite as well, in that if it moves you and it's good, like algorithms deciding what you listen to, that's terrible. But if it moves you and it's good, I don't care where it came from. A lot of people said that hip hop was not music because they used sampling. But the vast majority of the hip hop artists who, launched the golden age of hip hop that ended up taking over the entire world were recontextualizing the original music in a way that the artists that made it could not themselves, and providing a culture and a viewpoint on it that they couldn't have done. That is why that, along with the concept of the battle, was why hip hop music and culture was able to evolve so rapidly and then expand around the world in a way that we've never seen culturally before. I think Gen AI used right is the same thing, except you are not just sampling music, you are sampling all of culture. But it's your job as a cultural critic, to A, have influences, B, synthesize them in a new way through you, through your point of view, that is creating something that couldn't have been created before. And that's not just generating slop. Like I said, it's ascending the friction to the things where, how do I make something new that has never existed before? That's very hard. But if it's great and we love it, it's great and we love it, But it's an incumbent on us to, Gen AI takes with one hand, gives with the other, It's incumbent on us to figure out how to model. I don't care what machines can do by themselves. We've seen a lot of slop, and we've seen what humans can do by themselves, and it's amazing. And I really care about us modeling what machines and humans can do together that's never been done before. And that's a noble and very hard challenge. But along with that, we're going to need new ways of disseminating and sharing, and we don't have those yet.
I agree with all that. I want to offer a little thought too. This is from a consumer psychology perspective and a little business strategy. We've seen creativity applied for decades in places that we typically don't look at it. And that's maybe what I'm going to hint at as part of the problem. So folks I work with in agriculture, right? You've seen evidence when you look at the label on nutritional packaging, most people don't, contains a bioengineered ingredient. Most people don't look at their food. Think there's thousands of examples like that have signaled the possibilities that you see in what we call the creative industries, like the music, the film, and other stuff. But creativity happens in so many sectors that people don't associate with it. So when you see the Monsantos of the world, they're creative. They may not do stuff you like, but they're impacting the world and how you interpret it. So all of these things that consumers accept, it's iterative. So, and maybe another thought also is, in marketing strategy, that we have this thing where we are trying to move people from choice to selection. What you have more of today is selection. You have very little choice expressed by consumers. So we end up with curation, we end up with algorithms and all the permutations of that. Much of where the power comes for consumers, for people, is in choice. But you've got to decide what your frame is, back to what I said earlier. Many consumers don't have a frame for choice. They have a frame for selection. So they get things presented to them with limited choice, really limited selection, but they think it's choice. So, I go back again one more time to the hip hop thing, back from 89 to 93, really good years. Amen. Right? That whether you were an MC or like a real hip hop consumer, you would never let pass what was not authentic. Not a chance. Like zero. Zero. That's what I was alluding to earlier about listening to music together. You develop that pressure test culture. Where is that today? If consumers are selecting more than choosing, it's very hard to achieve a pressure test-ready culture. So it's a matter of choice. What do we want to be? That's going to set the kind of future that we have to consume from.
Thank you. All right, I see, Jade, so we have about 7 minutes left. I see Mina's hand. I'm going to give it to a student, and then we'll come back up to the front.
Hi, thank you all for coming here today. This topic is something that's been on my mind for a really long time because I've done some research on it, and on display, people have showed that they desire connection and human interaction. But I just think growing up in this generation, we have been conditioned to desire something, but we have not yet had the experiences that you have had in the analog age to know what that is. Because we lack that, we don't have the threshold to kind of synapse what that experience should be. So my question is, as people who've lived through that transitional period, what was that threshold of transition in your culture and your experiences and how you live that you think is different and that you think potentially we as the next generation are missing out on?
Well, we didn't have phones.
Truth.
So we had to sit on the bus and look out the window and think about things deeply. And I mean, I have this, I went to see Bill Burr the other day on Wednesday I live down in North Carolina now. And we had to lock up our phones, for the entire, we were in a bag for the show. And, I have a 14-year-old and I talked to him about, addiction of devices and the slop in shorts that he gets and he can't even remember what he watched. And then me and my wife do the exact same thing, and we're in a place where it's very challenging for us to be in the moment. We're looking for a little dopamine hit all the time. And we didn't have that. So we're lucky, but we also stumbled through everything in the 80s and 90s. And there is a beauty to that. There's mistakes and there's ugliness. You also said, hey, do you want to meet Friday at 9 o'clock? And you just assumed the person would be there Friday at 9 o'clock. And they were, a lot. So it took a level of commitment, right? To each other and trust and but also holding each other accountable too. I was there, it was raining, you weren't there. So I don't know if there's a solution, but there's a lot to be said for stumbling through very messy human experiences together.
I would maybe just offer one thought. We had, I'm gonna say I still have this, and my children have it, 11 and 9, a fuller relationship orientation with the things we consume. So music is not just the sound. It's the vibration, it's the cassette tape, it's the vinyl, it's the record, it's the notes, it's the reading. So yeah, it's the cash money. Some of you know that term still, right? It's the cash, it's the process. So that we had such a relationship journey with the things we consumed, right? Whether we thought about them, we had anticipation. There's no time for this, but there's a whole range of chemicals in your brain that get activated that might be missing for today's consumer. In terms of, I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but in terms of forming relationships with the things you consume, so they have meaning, right? You don't buy something for what it is, you buy it for what it means. And so, again, I say choice. Allow yourself more dimensionality in the things you consume. Sometimes that just means slow down. Sometimes that means go to the store, not looking for anything in particular. Just go discover, right? Try to touch things, listen to them. Go to the mall.
Go to the mall.
Just.
I was going to say, Dave gets last word, and then we can continue this conversation as we kick off the block party. No. Dave, you're so kind. Go ahead and have the last word.
Dave.
Building off of what they both said, this happened just Monday. I had a day off from work with a high school friend. We were supposed to go to the Colbert Show in New York. Didn't work out. So we hung out at his house in his music room. Now, we're friends since high school, surrounded by all the music that he loves. Artifacts, posters, booklets, CDs, vinyl, and we listened to music together. And I think what I'm trying to say is two things. You can always do these things. You can always get off the conveyor belt, as somebody said earlier, and get off of it. Just don't let it keep moving you where you think where it's taking you, where you're supposed to go. And when I left his house, I could not believe how much I needed that. Because I listen to music daily, probably like most of us, in my earbuds. I was reminded how we were not just listening to music, we were reminiscing, we felt the music, we shared stories. I mean, there's a lot more to the experience than the film itself, the song itself. Again, it's been said up here several times, but like, that's the thing, you can still have these things, you can try. You can have something that maybe you think wasn't of your time, because it's still there, you just have to put a little effort into it. Yeah. Like, make it happen. Like, get together with your friends and put on a new record together. And you'll be surprised, it could be a very different experience. So.
And go see the Wu-Tang, the Final Chamber tour. Because it's still around, and Wu-Tang is for the children.
I feel like I want to sum this up by saying subvert the algorithms. Go subvert the algorithms. We are at the end of time. I am so appreciative of everybody being here, and we are all, let's give our panel a round of applause. We are all welcome to go out and have the party at the BCE block party. DJ Jasmine Solano, who asked her excellent question about AI and music, is going to be performing for us. There's also going to be cake. And please come up and ask any additional questions to our panelists. Thank you.